All of us.
All of us are guilty.
All of us are guilty.
All of us.
All of us.
All of us.
All of us are lost.
All of us are lost. Lost.
Lost.
Hello, and welcome back to All of Us Are Lost, a podcast 20 years on from the events of the mysterious island, as myself, Kat, and my co-host Andy delve into the mysteries and see what is more confusing, our memories of the show or how the show actually plays out. We are now over that midway slump, and we are racing towards the end of season 1. Andy, what episodes have we got today?
So today we're covering episode 16, Outlaws, and episode 17, In Translation. One, I think we had mentioned, not in the previous episode, but the episode before, that how, I think the episode was literally had the title filler in it. That those were, they felt as if they were kind of padding out a bit as well. This seems a wee bit similar with these two. Not to the level that episodes it would have been 12 and 13 were, but it definitely feels, especially from that sort of high of the showdown with Ethan, that we're now here again and kind of taking a step back from a lot more of the mysteries anyway.
Yeah, considering that the last episode ended with, the brutal murder of, this mysterious other Ethan, and left a load of questions in the air as to what his intentions were and what were they going to do now that Charlie had killed off their only chance at finding anything out about life on the island. Everybody does seem to move on quite quickly. So our first episode, Outlaws, is it's a Sawyer centric episode, but kind of like his main story on the island is that there's a boar bullying him essentially, which kind of feels very anticlimactic considering, Sawyer was one of the people that witnessed Charlie kill Ethan. You think maybe he might have something else on his mind other than this boar's being really mean to me.
Yeah, it did to me feel actually like a wee bit of a step back for the character of Sawyer, because we've seen him a bit more empathetic and a bit more involved with the rest of the islanders. And this one again, he seems to be determined to go on this sort of loner quest. He seems to think the boar has a personal agenda against him. It opens with a flashback actually, and I think the flashback in this episode is
Yes.
definitely a lot more interesting than the sort of main storyline that's on the island. It opens essentially with the death of, or from young Sawyer's perspective, the death of his mum and dad. One by murder, one by suicide. And a really intriguing opening to it. And then, he just then starts chasing a boar who has ripped his tent down and ran it into the forest. And it's almost like it's quite comedic, this episode, in terms of Sawyer's interactions with the boar. And his hate relationship does develop a wee bit more as well in this one. The flashbacks are definitely the stronger part, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that opening flashback is just so brutal, and we've seen some dark elements in some of the previous flashbacks, but this like takes the cake. Gives starts off with Sawyer's mum like running into the room, hiding her son underneath his bed so that it appears to his father that he's not there. Like, she's frantic. He turns up hammering on the door. Then he's got a gun. Then we hear one gunshot, and then we hear another gunshot. And we know from Sawyer's letter that both of his parents died and that his dad killed his mum, but we didn't quite appreciate the fact that Sawyer had a front row seat to this. I mean, that is going to close you off from other people in the world, and it is going to make you a bit bitter and twisted. And it's almost to the point where you kind of feel that maybe he's actually pretty well adjusted for somebody that has watched a murder suicide of his parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think from what we see from him later on in the flashbacks as well, he still seems to have a bit of a loner mentality to him. Although we do get a really good cameo from the T1000 himself, Robert Patrick, as Hibbs. So there's hints at other jobs they've done together, and I think Hib says to him, "This squares us up for the Tampa Bay job, or the Tampa job. Sorry, not Tampa Bay. It's a sports team. I don't know." And it's interesting that he has other connections, but they do seem very transactionary in his past life, and that's quite similar to how he's living on the island as well. Everything's a transaction, giving him something to get something back, essentially, is the way he's sort of placed himself on the island. Except with Kate, who we see again a bit of sort of bit flirtatious, but she's they're certainly a lot more open with each other now as well. They have a bit of a not set to slight argument later on in the episode, but they also have a semi-bonding scene where the two of them are drinking together, playing a game that they called I Never. I think I Never.
Yeah.
Or, I think the version I'd heard of that was Never Have I Ever, but he says it as
Yeah.
I Never. And it's talking about basically their past as well, and I think he's saying sees a kindred spirit in Kate. So that's his sort of his totem on the island.
Yeah, the Never Have I Ever game became around about this time. It was a big trope, particularly in teen shows. It was because it's a great way of spilling secrets and things. I mean, I think the one I remember most is One Tree Hill. The characters kind of did it, and I think like one of the affairs or something came out during that. So it's this great little plot device to get your characters to expose parts of themselves that they wouldn't necessarily. And in this, we find out that not only has Kate killed a man, which we already knew about, but Sawyer has killed a man. But also we find out that Kate was married. We
Yeah.
haven't learned this about Kate. It feels like Jack has tried so hard to break down all of Kate's walls, as we've seen, and we saw him a couple of episodes ago getting really frustrated with the fact that she doesn't trust him and she doesn't tell him anything, and he has to drag it from her. And yet with Sawyer, a couple of airplane minibar shots, and she's confessing that she killed a man and that she's been married before. So it's quite interesting to see the different dynamics that she has with these two different men.
That shocked me as well, the Kate marriage thing, because she's also very flippant about it. And we've known from previous episodes that she said that her wee toy plane that she got was from the man she killed. She was previously claiming it was from the man she loved. Are those two the same person? And is it linked to her marriage? See, it didn't last long. So we can take from that maybe that that's not linked at all to the murder, or it's not linked to anyone she's loved. She says she's been in love before. But yeah, it just felt very brushed over, and I think Sawyer would strike me as the person that would maybe pry a wee bit more about that. And as you said, with Kate, the way she is with Sawyer, she would maybe open up about it a bit more as well. It's interesting, Sawyer saying he's never been in love before as well. He's a con man. Did that just been his whole life? Although I'm interested about his age, because she asked him if he wore pink, and he says that was the 80s. What age would he been in the 80s? He could have been, what, I suppose maybe he would have been 30 odds, maybe when he's on the island. It could have worked. Just seems like the 80s was so long ago for when they're meant to be on that. But I can't imagine him.
Well,
Pink
obviously,
cowboy hat.
obviously Lost is 20 years ago. So then, and the 80s was like 40 years ago. Well, 84 was 40 years ago. So
Yeah.
if he was 20 on the island, then no, he wouldn't have been wearing pink in the 80s. But I imagine he was sort of like late 70s, and then he was like, I don't know, like mid 70s, and then he was a teenager for part of the 80s, and
Yeah.
then his 30s on the island. But yeah, I think, as we've discussed, it's kind of hard to place anyone's age as
Yeah.
such, because I mean, Jack's got to be in his 30s at least, given the level of surgeon that he's progressed to with all of like the med school and everything. So
Yeah. And I saw a picture of Josh Holloway, a recent one from today, and he kind of just looks the same. Maybe like a couple of wrinkles. That's about it. And that's a man that's probably not far off 60. Just doesn't age. It's not fair.
so so they have this game of Never Have I Ever, and they have this sort of like big revelation moment of closeness, and then we get to the next morning, and it's an episode that's having a bit of fun despite the bleak opening and some of the other stuff that comes into it a little later on. It's having a bit of fun, the fact that there's this boar. I mean, before Sawyer's gone on his hunt, Saeed's turned up and has taken the mickey out of him that, oh, the big bad boar stolen your top.
Yeah.
But here, the next morning, the camp has been trashed, but it's only Sawyer's things that have been touched. And then just randomly, in walks John Locke. Like, morning, guys. Like, I was in the area. I thought I'd come and say hello. And then he sits down and he opens up in a way that he hasn't opened up to anybody before. And suddenly
Yeah.
we find out that he was in foster care, that he had a sister who died when she was a child, and then we get this story about how his foster mother kind of believed that this dog that turned up, a golden retriever, which is the dog that Vincent is. Is that right? Is Vincent a golden retriever?
No, Vincent's a yellow lab.
Yeah.
Golden retrievers are
Uh,
like longer
okay.
coated. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's he's like saying that this, the mother believed that the dog was a reincarnation
Mm.
of his sister, and it's just that it's a really like intimate moment to come from Locke, who is normally closed up, and he's not really been particularly close to Kate or Sawyer, and yet he just rocks up, sits down, tells a really traumatic part of his childhood, and then off he pops again.
Mm. And yeah, he's very yeah, it kind of floats in and out of this and kind of the next episode as well, when we come on to that. But I was shocked at how open he was. But then with Locke, you don't know how. Like, there's never really been a sense that he's a liar. He's hiding the truth. And he's hiding what he's doing in the island and what he's doing in the jungle with Boone in terms of the hatch. But I just don't know with him. Like, has he been listening to Sawyer and Kate during the night? He could have been. You never know. He's very. He can look after himself even in the deep of the jungle at night. So has he been overhearing them? Is he maybe playing on the way Sawyer is with this kind of obsession with the boar? Yeah, I don't know how to take him in this one. I'd be hoping he would be telling the truth because it is quite a very specific way to maybe try and get people to warm to you and open yourself up a bit to them. But it's interesting that he has been a bit floaty in recent episodes, as in popping up when kind of opportune moment arises, and it feels like there's something going on in the background with him, apart from the hatch, which we all kind of know about now.
Mm. And then in the flashback, we got Robert Patrick's character Hibbs turning up to in his apology for whatever went wrong in the past. He has bought him the head, so to speak, of the man that
Mm.
ruined Sawyer's life, of the con man whose name he has taken, and sends Sawyer on this vengeance quest to kill this guy. And along the way, Sawyer stops in a bar. And who is at the other end of the bar but Christian, Jack's dad. And we've already seen Sawyer briefly pop up in the background of Boone's flashback Hearts and Minds, and here
Mm.
he is again having a direct contact with somebody who was technically on the plane. I think it's very interesting that as much of an outsider as he is on the island, he actually appears to be kind of like the connective tissue that links everybody before.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to use that exact phrasing. Yeah, like the connective tissue. And the chat with Christian and Sawyer is very open as well. He does seem to be, well, I say it's very open. Christian is more open than we've seen him.
Yeah.
He seems to be very accepting of the fact that he's accepted his fate as such. And fate comes into it again near the end of the episode. That what happened to him was correct. What Jack done for him in terms of shopping him and drinking on the job and surgery and causing the death of a woman and a child. He said that it was the best thing he could have done for him. He says Jack's a better man than him. He then, I mean, he's clearly been in Australia for a while because he's got no money and he's mooching off a Sawyer a wee bit to get a free drink and a lot of free drink. So it's almost like he's accepted his fate that having botched what I'd assume would be his dream job in his whole career, he's now just going to drink himself into oblivion. And
Mm.
the sort of religious connotations as well, where he's talking about this is as close as you can get to hell, being in Australia, which is a bit harsh, I would think. But I can imagine with the heat, maybe that's what he's discussing. But with what we know and kind of levels of spirituality and everything that's been in the show so far, that mention of hell and that mention of fate is really interesting.
Yeah, and it's everything that Christian is saying is everything that Jack wishes his father had ever said to him, and it's that classic thing, or particularly I think between father-son relationships, where the dad, in a mission not to look weak in front of their child, kind of shuts off and doesn't praise or encourage them in the way that would be helpful to their child. And instead he's saying all of this stuff to Sawyer rather than Jack. And it's kind of, he just said it to Jack, things would have been, so different.
Mm. Maybe wouldn't be in the situation that he's in, and maybe Jack wouldn't have been on the plane if they had maybe had a heart to heart a few years earlier, because he'd always been pushing Jack and said it was for his own good and for his career and to make him the best doctor and surgeon that he could be. But it seems that he's done that at the expense of actually forming a proper bond and proper relationship with his son. The the whole thing with the fate as well, and we'll maybe can touch on it now, is after Sawyer's had his sort of boar encounter, he gives up. He says it's only a boar anyway, it doesn't matter. Again, almost kind of accepting of what's happened. He's not wanting to be too determined with it and too focused on it now. There was a mention at the start of the episode of when Jack and Kate are putting the guns away. There's only one left, and Kate says, "I'll get that for you. Don't worry, I can convince Sawyer to give you it back." And then there's the sort of last scene between Jack and Sawyer in this episode. Jack uses a quote that his dad uses to Sawyer in the bar as well, and that's why the Red Sox never won the series. And I think the way Christian had used it, certainly from Jack's interpretation, as he said, it's well, that's just kind of, it's not my fault. It was destined to happen, or destined not to happen, I suppose, with the Red Sox. I don't really get that reference. Baseball, maybe, I'm not too sure. So there is then that level of, and you see it clicking in Sawyer's head, that someone
Mm.
said that to me before. He was a doctor as well, and he said his son was a doctor. And the fact that Sawyer leaves it, it's maybe showing him as being standoffish and him wanting to still be quite a loner, doesn't want the attention of Jack on him. Because if Jack, he turns around and says, "Oh, I spoke to your dad in a random bar in Sydney," and then Boone clicks that he saw Sawyer, and everything could just fall in itself. And it's it's a great moment. Actually, I really loved it. The fact that we're starting to find these connections now, and it's having them in place for later on, where yeah, like I said, it could all come crashing down if people find out their connections off the island before they've got there.
Yeah, it's a great little moment where you see Sawyer sort of picking these things. And again, he knows that he could give that information, and
Mm.
it might, ease Jack a little bit, because he's sort of confronted with the fact that that man that he was drinking with is now dead. But he doesn't he's quite comfortable with the people that he's open with, and he's not quite ready for Jack to be one of those people. Um,
Mm.
and sort of thinking of outside of sort of the Sawyer storyline on the island, it does eventually, during the episode, address the Charlie in the room. Hurley becomes quite concerned and goes to speak to Saeed, and then Saeed's told to go and talk to Charlie about, suffering from PTSD. And again, we've got somebody confessing to murder. And I just kind of thought to myself on a rewatch, like, how many murderers are there on the island? Because we know that Kate's killed somebody. In this episode, we see Sawyer kill somebody. Um, Saeed's admitting to being part of a firing squad. We've seen Charlie kill somebody. It's like this whole island just seems to be full of murderers.
Mm. And and Locke probably hasn't killed anyone off the island, but he certainly got the ability to do it on the island. Um, yeah, the interaction with Said and Charlie was it was a nice moment between the two as well. The relationships are getting stronger between different aspects of the group. Even, we've touched on Jin softening a wee bit, Sawyer becoming more accepting of different people of the group, and Said and Charlie. I've not seen them interact a huge amount. I don't think, certainly not the level that Said has maybe with Jack. But Charlie doesn't seem to, like, Harley's concerned about PTSD, and Charlie doesn't seem to actually really be affected by that. I think he's just being quiet and a bit contemplative. He had been a bit standoffish with Claire earlier in the episode as well. Just in terms of he was wanting to talk to him, but I think it's because he's not told her that Ethan's dead. He's not told her that he killed her. So that's maybe why he's being so quiet. But he think he says, "I would do it again." Basically, that he's dead. He deserved to be dead, and if I had to, I would do it again. So maybe there isn't an element of PTSD in him. Maybe, but the conversation side does say to him, "You're not alone," and that talks to kind of everyone on the island, because pretty much none of them are. They know there's other people there, and yeah, but it was a nice character moment for the two of them. Side's fast kind of becoming a favourite of mine on this rewatch, I think.
Yeah, and see, sort of mentioning Sawyer being a murderer. So in the
Mm,
flashback, we see him confront who he believes to be the man that ruined his life. Is this guy working in a sort of like a greasy spoon on the beach sort of thing, and they chat, and he reveals that, oh, he used to like live in the same part of America and stuff. And so after initially bottling killing this man, he has his little conversation with Christian, and then he
mm,
he goes back and he shoots this guy, and then he starts reading him the letter, and then this guy's like, what, who? No, that's not me, I'm not Sawyer. And it turns out that Robert Patrick's character of Hibbs has basically set the whole thing up, because this guy hasn't paid him, and he
mm,
knows that Sawyer will quite happily go and kill whoever he believes to be this man. So it's kind of this tragic thing of Sawyer's taken the life, but he's taken the wrong life, which
mm,
then weighs him down with a lot of guilt.
yeah, and he would have been expecting a moment of relief from that as well, killing the man that
Yeah.
he believed had killed his or led to his parents' death. Um, the fact that he's now just got someone else's life hanging over him. He probably has an element of guilt towards his parents as well, even though he was so young, especially maybe his mother. And now he's going to have this hanging over him. It was an odd thing that it went from the conversation with Christian to him then making that decision. I don't know if that was maybe to do with the fate thing again. Um, was he did he see it as fate that he got to Australia and found this guy and had the chance to kill him, or was it all? Was he trying to go against his fate by not bottling it and going back and finding him? It's that sort of duality with it. I found interesting, but it certainly would have probably brought Sawyer back into his shell again in terms of relationships with other people because Hibbs has played him. And
Yeah.
from what it sounds like, Hibbs has played him again because he did say to Robert Patrick, "I thought I told you next time I see you, if I see you again, I'd kill you." So, I mean, now that he's killed someone, maybe it makes it easier to go back to Hibbs and kill him if we see him again in future flashbacks. So it's a whole. And now as well, he's going to be wanted in Australia. Is he now trying to get out of there as fast as he can? So it's all doesn't look as if it's pointing towards anything good for Sawyer with his actions there.
Mm. And I guess the final thing to mention about this episode is we finally learn Sawyer's real name because we know that Sawyer is the name that he's taken from the con man. And when
Mm.
he's talking in this episode, he says his name is James. So we have
Mm.
his actual name. He's James. But I mean, I don't know if which again, I guess just sort of thinking that he's always kind of like projected this kind of like cowboy thing, and
Mm.
like you've got like Jesse James and stuff, so it kind of still fits that stereotype. But I kind of feel that he would just forever be Sawyer to the audience, despite that not technically being his real name.
Mm. It's the same with Hurley, though, isn't it? Like we've got two guys that are just nicknames, almost different way of acquiring them. Certainly for Sawyer, but yeah, he's always Sawyer. He looks like a Sawyer. He doesn't look like a James.
So that takes us on to our next episode, which is in translation, which I think this one does kind of feel, yeah, like you said at the start, sort of very kind of fillery, just purely from the respect that the flashbacks in this one we've kind of already seen. So this
Mm.
is a Jin centric episode, and all of the flashbacks line up with the ones that we saw in House of the Rising Sun, which was
Yeah.
from Sun's point of view. So now we're getting his side of that story, which I think to a degree does change your perception of
Mm.
Jin, which I think is needed because he started out the series. I hated this guy, and so we
Yeah.
need to see this development, and that there was something out to him, because I think when we saw House of the Rising Sun, there was just a lot of Sun being left on her own, and her husband was working late and he was neglecting her and stuff. But in this, we get to see that it wasn't necessarily Jin that was doing the neglecting; it was Sun's father forcing him to do the neglecting, which I thought was quite interesting.
Mm. And we get the origin story of the puppy, which isn't something I thought we'd have ever got. But that poor little girl gets her puppy stolen just because Jin doesn't kill the guy. Slightly harsh. But yeah, it was. What I did find about this, though, for me, the opening island scene is Jin again seems as if he's regressed a bit. We had spoke about him softening, but then
Yeah.
Sun's on the beach in a bikini, and he's very goes back to conservative Jin again. Wants her covering up, embarrassed that she's what he would see as flaunting herself on the island. But it does show, as you said, from that other perspective that Jin, hmm, he's not. I wouldn't even say he's easily manipulated. He's manipulated because of his love for Sun initially. Anyway, we don't know what else he's done, but he doesn't. Everything he's been doing has been from a good place. He wants to open up his own restaurant, and he ends up indebted. Well, indebted may be the wrong word, but certainly in under the thumb of Sun's dad. Um, he has to do exactly what he tells him, which involves threats, intimidation, uh, violence. But overall, I think you do see him as being a good person at heart.
Yeah, we find out a key piece of information, which kind of explains some of his behavior on the island in the respect of when he's talking to Sun's father, he says that he's from a small fishing village, which
Mm,
explains why Jin has been feeding the island fish for the last month, is because, he grew up fishing with his family.
yeah.
He spends a lot of the flashbacks whenever somebody mentions, he basically lets Sun and her family think that his father's dead, and it's later revealed that he's not dead. He's just ashamed of the fact that he is a lowly fisherman. But I think
Mm,
when I don't know if I can't remember it being explained in House of the Rising Sun, but you saw Jin as a waiter, and Sun was like the boss's daughter and stuff. And I got the impression that like they were super, super, super wealthy. But then in this,
mm,
it's his her dad runs a car company, and I'm just a bit confused as to why a car company amounts to so much wealth, and then going around and intimidating like secretaries of state and things for
mm.
environmental issues, and that it all seems a big leap considering he's basically like a car salesman.
Yeah, there's clearly something else behind them then. Like, it's, as you're saying, that amount of wealth have been for the son's dad being a car dealer. A car dealer doesn't have his own hitman.
No,
And
I don't
as you said,
think.
doesn't, no, I've never, I don't come across them very often, but they've never threatened me to that level to buy anything off them. And I mean, if I did, I'd probably buy it to get it over with. But yeah, there's never a. Certainly, they wouldn't have their own hitman. They wouldn't send people to intimidate, as you said, Secretary of State. It's very underhand, and it seems as there's a lot more criminality ongoing behind the scenes than just here's a car and don't change the emissions laws or whatever it is in South Korea that he's very worried about.
Yeah, yeah. It just struck me as odd. Were this
Mm,
Japan, I'd be like, oh, Yakuza, but this is Korea, and I'm not quite sure what the Korean variant of that is. But it definitely feels like we've got some sort of ties there. I mean, when Jin is driving the hitman and he's like telling him all this stuff, um, and Jin, immediately picks up on what's going to happen, and then instead goes in. And again, this is just, I feel like this episode's just been child trauma. We've had Sawyer witnessing the death of his parents, and then we've got this poor little girl who has had her puppy stolen, and then she's trying to have a dinner, and Jin comes in and beats her dad to a bloody pulp. I mean, it's better than him being murdered, but still, that's a lot. That's a lot over a couple of nights.
and I feel as well like the hitman had a very specific job, and the fact that Jin went in and just beat this guy up, that man was just like, okay, that'll do. Can't imagine that going down well with Sun's father if he had a very specific outcome in mind for this guy, and Jin has kind of prevented it again. Like, so he was the reason the hitman was sent is because when Jin was sent to give the message, which won't be good for the audio, but I'm doing quotations. Um, he basically says he delivers a message, says he's very disappointed in you. So the hitman aspect gets brought into it, but I feel like that's maybe not the end of it with that uh, level of retribution that Sun's dad wants against this guy. Um, and yeah, you mentioned the as well, Jin and his dad. It's interesting that Sun's got such a high opinion of her own father because she sees him as this successful businessman, while we're seeing the sort of undercurrent of him and what he's done for maybe wealth, for power, whatever it might be. And then you've got Jin on the other hand, who's ashamed of his dad, who is just kind of working hard, trying to provide for, probably has been trying to provide for his family. And they have a great heart to heart in this, where he says, well, do you know what? Get away, go to America, and make a new life for yourself. Which is a theme kind of throughout this episode as well. That we get with Shannon inside, isn't it, later on?
Yeah, I think the other thing to touch on in the flashback is we've got another very tenuous link to an islander. So when Jin turns up that first night to deliver the message, um, that little girl is sat all snuggled up with that puppy that is soon going to get wrenched from her hands. And on the TV, you see Hurley. You see Hurley on a news report. He's like getting into a car, and it's like, huh, what's Hurley doing on the telly? So it's kind of,
Yeah.
again, it's showing that the islanders were kind of all circling each other before they ended up on this island. It's a very blink and you'll miss it Easter egg, but it's like,
Mm.
oh, why is Hurley on the telly? Because from what we've seen of Hurley so far, he doesn't strike anybody as the sort of person that would make the TV.
Mm. I completely missed that, so I'll make of a check. I believe you though, don't worry. And that's interesting. It is definitely seen now that there's more connective tissue. Like we spoke of Sawyer in the previous episode being the only one that we'd really seen, and this is now that expanding those little kind of nuggets of information falling about in just like innocuous circumstances as well. As just like as I said, I missed that, so it's not thrown in your face as such.
It's not beating you over the head, being like, look at the telly, look who's on the telly, who's that on the telly? It is just a little subtle thing that you can go, oh, wait a minute, was that? Um, and then so throughout all of Jin's flashbacks, he's doing all of this for Sun. Sun is his dream, and he's willing to
Mm,
do whatever it takes to be with her. And that is in stark contrast to the Jin that is on the island, as we've said. The episode starts off with him being, quite toxic. He wants her to wrap up. And you see Claire and Charlie, walking along the beach, and Kate and Jack, and they're all kind of commenting on, oh, they're at it again. Do we
mm,
intervene? Or, oh, this is what they always do. But then Jin pushes, or she like stumbles, and it looks like Jin's pushed Sun to the ground. And then Michael gets involved. And we've seen these two sort of like go toe to toe
mm,
before, and they get into a fight, but then Sun slaps Michael, and then she goes to apologize and says, my husband is capable of awful things. I hit you
mm,
to protect you. And then she's sort of fighting with Jin about her relationship to Michael, because Jin's picking up on something between them, and it
mm,
all feels very jealous and controlling and very much at odds with him doing whatever he can to provide a lovely life for her.
mm. And Jin also goes through a bit of a sort of solitary trek himself at this point. He goes and plays golf, or certainly hacking at things anyway. Hurley tries to reach out to him to just take a bit of stress out and says, let's go fishing. Jin just ignores him. He sleeps. It looks like he's sleeping in the jungle that night as well.
Mm.
So he's gone in his own little John Locke adventure, without really knowing what he's doing. I mean, he's good at fishing, but how much has he dealt with sort of jungle life and big monsters, and possibly boar that are going to gore you or have a personal vendetta against you? So not his smartest move, but it's the tension between him and Michael just builds up again, and then we get Michael, who's obviously been trying to build a raft for him and Walt getting off, and he's made. I mean, he's done a cracking job of building that raft from. I know he's
Yeah.
involved in construction, but that looks if it would hold up if they went out. Um, so they've had that tension, and then Michael's raft is just set on fire. Everyone assumes it's Jin, and we'll come to that it's not. But Sun's like kind of witnessed his hands are burnt, and because he's been so standoffish with her now, then he doesn't tell her what's happened. He doesn't say, "I tried to stop it." That we've seen anyway. So it doesn't come to light that till a wee bit later on.
Yeah, and the burning of the raft is one of those. It is like a big sort of like whodunit thing for that, because yes, the obvious
Mm,
suspect is Jin, but we've also had a conversation between Jack and Michael where Jack's like, everyone's like really keen to know like who you're taking. And Michael says, well, we've only got 4 spots and we've only got 1 spot left, because obviously there's himself and Walt, and then Sawyer, being Sawyer, has bought himself a spot on the boat. So there's only 1 spot left, and it could be anybody then on the island that's heard this and is like, well, if I'm not going to
Mm,
go, then no one can go, sort of thing.
mm,
I remember pegging who it was quite early on, first time round,
mm,
just because of this. I mean, obviously we're a rewatch podcast, so it's revealed eventually that it is Walt that has done this. I think it's pretty obvious during the conversation where Michael's like, "Yeah, we're going to go to New York and we're going to look at the buildings. We're going to do this," and just Walt just isn't very interested. And then in the aftermath of the raft being burnt down, he's like, "Oh, can I help you build a new one?" And it's that like classic guilt of a kid when they've done something wrong and they suddenly realize that, oh crap, no, like I shouldn't have done that. And they kind of then try
mm,
to overcompensate. But so I always kind of had a thing of, oh, I thought it was either Walt or Locke, because there's a shot of Locke just kind of like standing looking around as the fire's going. Um,
mm.
so I kind of knew, as much as I didn't like Jin, I knew it wasn't Jin, but it was just
Yeah,
like, what are the
yeah.
reasons for who does it?
Hmm. I had totally forgot it was Walt. Um, so that was a bit of a shock to me. But it's again this thing of Locke floating in and out. He does it sort of twice in this episode. Um, he has that conversation with Walt. Why did you burn the raft? And Walt says, well, I've moved about my whole life and I quite like it here. And Locke says that I like it as well. So another kindred spirit between, I mean, what Walt likes is, I've not got a clue. For a kid at that age, he must just be bored, but apparently not. Happy with Vincent. And I hope when that raft, Vincent's included. Like, you kind of believe in him behind, or her. Can't remember if Vincent's. Anyway, um, the fact that Locke and Walt again have this connection over Checkers, where they've had probably the strongest connection of the series right near the beginning, and they both can understand that there's something here for them. There's something on this island that Walt's got a strange obsession with staying, clearly, and Locke is understandably intrigued and interested, and he can walk again, so he's obviously going to want to stay. Um, the big sort of another big revelation in this was everyone finding out that Sun can speak English.
Yeah.
Michael is sort of raining holy hell on Jin because Jin says something to him. We don't actually get the translation at this point. Don't know why, but Jin's certainly seems quite aggressive towards Michael, and he'll be able to understand Michael's body language that he's not happy with him, but he keeps kind of goading him without fighting back. Though he goads him until the point where Michael hits him, and he gets hit again, and he doesn't really. He's not even really defensive or offensive at all. He just kind of sits there and takes it, which leads to Sun just screaming out he didn't do it in English in front of everyone, which I would imagine people were maybe not happy about if they've been talking in front of her, maybe sharing
Yeah.
secrets, thinking, yeah, the person that we thought we were safe in front of now knows absolutely everything. I think up until this point it was only Michael and Kate, wasn't it? So with everyone knowing, I mean, it'll make it maybe not. I was going to say it would make it easier for Jin and Sun, but Jin then just immediately leaves the caves and he feels betrayed. And Sun is saying to him, I want us to go back to the beginning. And he said, it's too late. And I think there's just an element of stubbornness from him because it seems an odd decision to make, but I think he's so headstrong that it was always going to end that way because there'll be a betrayal he'll feel at that point.
Yeah. And then the next day we see him go up to Michael. Michael's obviously building Raft 2.0. And Jin, he does know some English. He wanders up and he says boat, and
Mm,
then they get to work building that. And then you see Sun again in a bikini on the beach, and she just lets the towel go because it's kind of almost like these two have, separated now, and she can, be free of
Mm.
his oppression to, at least her appearance.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that he's now building the raft with Michael, who for all intents and purposes has been his enemy up until this
Mm.
point. And it's that thing of, is he building the raft to get rid of Michael? Is he building the raft so that he can sail away and leave Sun? Or, given what we've seen of Jin previously, is he building the raft, and then is his price going to be that they take Sun instead? So it's a few little options there, which I think is quite interesting.
Mm. Yeah, like a redemption for him and
Yeah.
making up for his past mistakes to her. But it's this episode, the whole thing is, as I mentioned the Locke quote earlier, like everyone gets a new life. You've got Jin and Sun now, almost like starting a new life with maybe a bit of a barrier between them now, with Sun speaking English. You've got also Side and Shannon, who Locke drifting in and out as he likes to do, and just poking into people's lives. He's the one that said, "Oh," he's the one that said to Shannon, "Everybody gets a new life here. Why don't you start yours?" Because she's been worried about. You're not worried about Boone. Sorry, Boone has a bit of a conversation with Side, and he seems to have moved on a wee bit, but Shannon isn't happy with it. And we almost get this. I think this is probably the first properly, maybe the first properly romantic moment we've had in the series between Shannon and Side, where they share a kiss and they're sort of sitting together on next to a fire later on as the episode's wrapping up. As Hurley's going about listening to his Sony Walkman, I think it might be, or a version of that. And it's like, yeah, there's everyone's getting like a fresh start on this place because you shouldn't hang on to the past almost, which is difficult in a show that has flashbacks.
Yes, definitely. And it's like, yeah, we've got the seemingly the sort of the end of the relationship between Sun and Jin, but then we have got the start of this romance between Saeed and Shannon, who couldn't be, I don't know, more opposite on paper, but they've connected. And we do get this conversation with Boone, which I think kind of reinforces my theory from one of the early episodes where Boone first kind of goes up to Saeed and is like, "You leave Shannon alone." Obviously, the first reading is, oh, he's jealous, he doesn't want his sister,
Mm.
with Saeed. But in this episode, he spells it out. It's like, my sister's going to use you. And we know from seeing, Boone's flashback where Shannon slept with him and then the next
Mm.
morning cast him aside, that he's lived this experience and he is,
Yeah.
warning Saeed off of her. And it works to a point, and then that's when Shannon gets mad and goes to see John. And then it's like, with Locke's permission, she then makes a move, and yeah, we've got this little romance building.
Mm. Aside does say in no uncertain terms to Boone, no, I'm not asking permission. I'm just letting you know as a courtesy. Because again, we know what Boone's like. Um, he's more of a pup than the actual dog that's on the island. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic known with Shannon and Saeed, how they're going to develop a relationship. And these have been very relationship heavy episodes. Both of these, I think, with the Kate and Sawyer relationship developing, the breaking up of the Jin and Sun relationship, and even Michael and Walt. Now, Michael doesn't know what Walt's done, but there certainly seems to be more of a father-son bond than we've seen as it's developed as on their time over the island. Maybe a month, 5, 6 weeks, not too sure at this point. So it's interesting that they've it was very relationship heavy, and I keep saying interesting. It was good to see that from the aspect of the episodes on their own. It didn't propel the story as much as I would have wanted, following the sort of death of Ethan. But I suppose you need to have these moments, because if it was all full blown action, I think you'd get a bit tired of it very quickly.
Yeah, I do feel like in this episode, Locke maybe shows his hand somewhat because he obviously knows that Walt is the one that has burnt down the raft, and
Mm,
he throws a diversion. Everybody's turning on each other, and he's like, "Why do we think it's one of us? We know we're not alone on this island. We know that there are others. Why we need
mm,
to stop fighting each other and focus on that real threat." And, we've spoken before about John seems to be preparing for some sort of future battle with the others that nobody else on the island seems to be looking for or prepared for. And this, I think we sort of said about him, maybe if he's not starting a cult, he's enlisting soldiers for this war
mm.
against them. But he's been very clever in how he's done it. And this is kind of just, it's a little blip for John where he's kind of showing his hand of, no guys, we need to go to war against these others.
Mm. And it also, for me, we spoke about Hurley being the sort of conduit for the audience near the start of the series. It's almost like at this point, Locke saying to us, "Look, yes, we've had this focus on everyone on the island, but remember, we've got danger. There's something around the corner. Just wait. You don't know what's coming. We don't know what's coming, but you have to be ready for it." It's prepping the islanders. It's prepping the survivors. It's giving them a sort of shot in the arm, but it's also like it's talking through to us and saying, get ready, because we, as you said, we are, I think now we've maybe got 5, 6 episodes left. It is properly going to come to a head soon.
Yeah. And this episode in translation it's been a lot of, heavy emotions, marriages breaking up, rafts on fire, a lot of tension. And then right at the end, you say we get Hurley wandering along, listening to, I think it's Damien Rice that he's listening to, who, kids who weren't alive back then. Damien Rice was big back then. I'm surprised it wasn't that the hangman's daughter. I'm surprised he wasn't listening to that. Um, but then, in typical Hurley fashion, he offers a little bit of comedy relief where the batteries go, and it's just like, oh, son of a bitch, and it's kind of just lifted all of that like oppressive tension and relationship drama we've
Yeah.
had, and it kind of ends the episode on a light relief note.
Mm. Yeah, certainly in comparison. And again, maybe that is the aspect of Hurley being aware of, no, not Hurley being aware, but the writers being aware through Hurley that what they've put us through the ringer very, in terms of emotions and relationships. And yeah, just ending on that lighter moment, just it takes away again, almost like a not like almost like a bait and switch. Yeah, we've had the drama, we've had Locke mentioning these others. Let's just forget about them again. Here's Hurley doing something funny, because next time you never know.
Yeah. And I think next time it is a Hurley
Mm.
episode, which is, we're going to be 18 episodes in, and we don't know a thing about Hugo. So
Mm.
I'm quite looking forward to delving into that one.
Yeah, yeah. Next episode, it'll be a standalone one for us. We're not going to be recording, covering 2 episodes for the next. Well, next recording, it's episode 18, Numbers. And for those that have watched previously and are on a rewatch with us, numbers are very, very important in this, and this is going to be a big episode. So we're going to take the time to sort of dissect it and go through it bit by bit, when you join us next time.
Yep. And in the meantime, you can find us both on various social medias. I am on Instagram and Letterboxd at Gizmo Shikari, or on Blue Sky at cathughes.bsky.social. And where can the watchers/listeners find yourself, Andy?
You'll get me on Twitter at Nowhere Andy, and on Blue Sky at Nowhere Andy as well. Just all the same with that.
Yep. So yes, get those lottery tickets in and those numbers written down, and join us in a couple of weeks as we unlock another one of the island's many mysteries.